Because if they have Trump on tape, if they have witnesses that were in the room with Trump, that were his supporters. Now, are they going to move the 30% of the Republican Party that's going to be with Trump no matter what? They probably are going to even be more for Trump now. No. And maybe Trump gets the nomination with an ankle bracelet. That remains to be seen. Wouldn't surprise me that he gets the nomination with an ankle bracelet.
That's hilarious. Welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known, the first president twice impeached, the first president criminally charged by state prosecutors, the first president found civilly guilty of sexual harassment. Donald Trump continues to be the first in ways that nobody else wants to be. He is now the first U.S. president to be federally indicted. He is in trouble. And we got the details coming up. Also, the Supreme Court on Thursday issued a surprising 5-4 ruling in favor of Black voters in a congressional redistricting case in Alabama, of all places. 2 conservative judges joining liberals in rejecting a Republican-led effort to weaken a landmark voting rights law. We're going to talk about that as well. Also, President Biden has named a czar to tackle the problem of book bans in the United States that are led by Republican governors like Ron DeSantis of Florida. We're going to discuss that as well, all this critical race theory nonsense. And as in America as air in America is dangerously polluted because of the wildfires, the U.S. is sending firefighters up to Canada to help with the fires up there. That is the cause of all the bad air, the pollution, and the reason why it's like COVID all over again. You got to stay inside. We're going to discuss all that and more with the whole crew this morning. Attorney Robert Tarver of the Tarver Law Firm in New Jersey. We got Barrington, and guess who's back? The man himself, Austin Cooper. What's going on, guys?
Morning.
So we're going to go right. Look, Nancy Grace used to say, unleash the attorneys. We're going to go right to the attorney. We're going to unleash Tarver. So what are we looking at here? Conspiracy. We're looking at some sort of espionage. He had had some documents and letters between him and Kim Jong-un of North Korea, among other things they found at Mar-a-Lago. What is going on here, Tarver?
Well, what's going on here is a case of Donald Trump's own making. No one else is responsible for any of these things except for Donald Trump. We have first and foremost charges of violations of the Espionage Act. And what the Espionage Act basically says is that if you use information against the interests of the United States and act against the interests of the United States, then that's a violation of the Espionage Act. Now, most people think of espionage as spying, but that's not necessarily it. It is doing something that is against the interest of the United States. And that's what's really interesting, because the question is, espionage violations of the Espionage Act go to the intent of the individual. So there is some indication that Donald Trump intended to do something that would not have been in the benefit of the United States. Secondly, we have obstruction of justice. Very simple thing that you stand in the way of the administration of justice and the process of justice. Third, we have a conspiracy count, which means that you agreed with at least one other person to do something that was illegal. Here, it's the obstruction of justice, as we're told. And fourth, it is lying to federal officials. And that's one that routinely I deal with clients with, because they decide that they want to talk to federal officials. And once you speak to federal officials, unlike most state officials, it is a crime to lie to the FBI, the DEA, the IRS, or any of those federal agencies. So that's what Donald Trump is up against.
Wow. I named all the first, but Power 96 said Trump will be the first U.S. president to seek political asylum in Russia. But let me ask you, Austin, because I know Barrington is loaded for bear, so we'll get to Barrington in a moment. But Austin, so we know that Trump with everything says witch hunt. The optics, though, some even non-Trump supporters can say the optics look kind of bad here, because he's like the leading Republican contender, and he'll be facing off against Biden again. And Biden is, this is his Department of Justice. What do you say to that?
I don't give any credence, respectfully to that at all. As Attorney Tarver said, Donald Trump is where he is because of Donald J. Trump and no one else. And I've heard some commentators say, this is a sad day in America. Not to me. It's a good day. It's a good day in America because finally the wheels of justice are turning on Donald J. Trump the way they would have long ago turned on any of us on this show, any of our viewers, any of our listeners. I remember aging myself, but I remember watching Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, in September of 1974, pardoning Richard Nixon, who had resigned about 3 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks before. And he said, our national nightmare is over. No, the national nightmare word, and that's, choicy words for white folks who are criminal. It was, America would have been fine had Richard Nixon gone to jail. We have gone through a civil war. We have gone through 2 world wars, a Korean War. We've gone through the civil rights movement, assassination of presidents, January 6th, 4 years of Donald Trump. We will be fine if Donald Trump does indeed go to jail. America will survive, and he needs to go to jail.
And Barrington, so President Biden's administration, their hands were tied here, right? I mean, he allegedly committed some serious crimes.
If their hands were tied, it's because they tied it.
Well, what I'm saying is that their hands are tied as far as, stepping in and saying, you know what, back off.
Telling who to back off?
The Department of Justice.
Well, if President Biden is to be believed, and I don't see any reason not to, he said it was all hands off. He just left it to them to do. Mm-hmm. So whoever's going to complain about what the DOJ is doing is some people that are running behind Donald Trump. I'm with Austin. I'm ecstatic because you sit down and you look at American history, and they always keep on telling you the fiction about what a noble country this is and what a great country this is. But if you are Black, Native American, something other than white, or if you're white and poor, if you're vulnerable, you're going to prison in numbers that is unseen in the history of the world. America, which only has 1/5 of the world's population, has the highest number of people behind bars. And it's not the Kennedys for the most part. It's not the Kennedys. It's not wealthy people who are ending up behind bars. It's regular people. So the fact that today the possibility exists that this dude might end up behind bars, it's about time. I mean, I think about when he came into office, they said he had 2,500 small claims and other cases against him for ripping off construction people, for ripping off small businesses. This dude is a goddamn criminal who has been allowed to do what he has wanted. And it's about time at 74 years old or 76 or whatever he is, that he's finally held responsible for his actions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he so again, all of these first, Attorney Tarver, how difficult might it be to prosecute a former president?
Well, by virtue of him being a former president, I think is a different issue than how difficult it would be to prosecute these particular claims. Let's talk about these claims first and foremost. Realistically, because Donald Trump has been so brazen, so public, and so clear about his intent to retain records in the face of the authorities trying to get those records back, and the fact that he repeatedly enlisted other people to be involved in those efforts to retain those records, that's going to make a fairly clear case. And I say fairly clear because I'm given the understatement. That is a prototype case of obstruction of justice. I don't consider that to be a very difficult case to prove because there's inside evidence, direct evidence of what he did, but there's also what we call circumstantial evidence. Remember the interview we did with Sean Hannity, where he talked about, I would do that, he didn't just say that it's something he could do. He said, I would do that, indicating that is his mindset, his intent. So no, It's not going to be difficult to prosecute this case from a legal perspective. Now, the real question is simply this. This case is now venued in the Southern District of Florida.
Yeah.
Which means that it will be tried in Miami, but it will also draw not just from Miami, but it will draw from all of Southern Florida. A lot of people have some difficulties in thinking that that's his home field and that he has a home field advantage. But the fact of the matter is that with regard to the Southern District, you're talking about Fort Lauderdale, you're talking about Broward, you're talking about all these different areas that are not necessarily his strength in the state of Florida. So look, a Miami grand jury chose to move forward with an indictment. I think a Miami jury could very well say that this is a credible case and that he should be found guilty.
And just go to show you how simple-minded Trump is, referencing Rob's reference to the Sean Hannity interview. Sean Hannity is trying to tell this simple orange man, trying to give him a life wrap, a life vest, whatever the hell you want to call it, and Trump would not take it. And he tried on 2 or 3 occasions before saying, "Okay, let's move on." This is the kind of individual that we are dealing with. And also, in terms of Stacey, you mentioned the political calculation. I don't know that the Republicans are saying that the Biden Justice Department is doing this in order to pump the brakes on his primary number one challenger on the GOP. I don't know that this helps Trump. I think it will galvanize Trump's base. I think that it would be a lot easier, and I could be wrong, but I think it would be a lot easier for for Biden to beat Trump than necessarily DeSantis or some of the others. So I don't think that this is politically beneficial, at least in terms of 2024, to the White House to justify them doing it. Keep in mind that this same Justice Department is looking at the president's son, and President Biden in both cases has taken a hands-off approach, as he should.
McCarthy and his minions have come out and blasted this already. And, Barrington, the Republicans were supposed to be the party of law and order, but this shows that law and order only applies to certain someones and not everyone.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, when you think about the fact that he was the head cook and bottle washer for the January 6th coup attempt, and that he's still in office, well, not still in office, that he's still walking on the street. Remember, 146 members of Congress were directly involved in trying to orchestrate the coup. So you can talk all day about justice and all that foolishness. None of them dudes should be in office. And they really should be behind bars.
Look, you know what the main thing about Donald Trump is? Donald Trump has sought overall, if you look at his past record, not just here as the president, but in other circumstances, he has sought to normalize abnormal behavior. Yeah. And so what he does is he does things that are abnormal, perhaps criminal, certainly unorthodox, in plain sight. And he does them repeatedly, believing that the normalization of those matters will keep him from being either indicted or in some way having to face some sanctions. And that's what he has done here. His belief that he could continuously, openly defy these things, and then being able to back off and say, hey, anyone would do it, or I didn't know, or I wasn't sure, or I wasn't acting with any type of malice because I let you all know exactly what I was doing. That's his plan. That's his MO. He did it in New York. He did it in Atlantic City. He does it all over the place. And that's where I think he's going to face his biggest downfall. Because here's a really interesting thing about federal law. The really interesting thing is if you get nicked on one of these things and you have to be sentenced, federal law allows for, and federal courts allow for, what is called consideration of relevant conduct. And all of that can be taken into account in fashioning a sentence, meaning that all of the things that he's done from January 6th to the things that Barrington talked about and stiffing people all over the United, All of those things are relevant conduct because they deal with your character and behavior. And a federal judge could use all those things to give him the maximum sentence.
Life. It sounds like life the way you described it, Tarver. David
Well, look,
Youngblood
all
said,
of those things, all of those areas of crimes and elements of crimes, they all have a maximum period of time. And so for all of these that we're looking at, the maximum under the Espionage Act, which is the largest one, I believe is 10 years. You can get more time because instead of running these sentences all together, if he is convicted of each of these, a court could say that we could make it consecutive. So it would be 10 years for this and another 10 years for this and another 5 years for that. I doubt that that would happen because they're all come up from the same scenario.
he said that would be beautiful.
Yeah.
So, attorney, we got a question for you, sir.
Yes, sir.
The Justice Department negotiated with Donald Trump for a year and a half. It was the Justice Department and another archive agency. I forget the specific name. For a year and a half before the Justice Department authorized the raid last August. A year and a half of negotiation. How much time, how much negotiation would the Justice Department have done with any of us on this show or our listeners?
None.
How much time would they have given us before they took us into custody or raided our homes?
Look, he got, he got the benefit, and you know what benefit we call that. He got that particular benefit, and he got the benefit of being the president. But see, what he didn't realize, and this is what is really interesting, what he didn't realize is that by continuing to negotiate and continuing to stay on the outside, he put himself in deeper legal jeopardy. It just made the case ultimately easier to prove, because here you got these officials begging and pleading, please give us our documents back, as opposed to, and he wants to raise Biden and he wants to raise I think it was I can't remember who else had the records. He wants to raise those individuals, but look at their conduct. When they found records, they gave them back. And it's very clear that the president, under the Presidential Records Act, has to give those documents back. They don't belong to him.
Well, David Youngblood says, when you leave the hospital as an infant in a limousine and every day after that is about your privilege, it's hard to understand that the law actually applies to you. And Power 96 says, the more Trump talks, the risk of guilt grows greater. He says, keep on talking, Trump. But one last question on this for you, Attorney Tarver, is, as a defense attorney, how do you defend someone like him who is continually in the media talking about the case? They had the New York case that's still pending. They had to bring him into Manhattan, into the courtroom, to say, listen, you can't talk about this or you can't talk about that. And yet nothing deters him. How do you defend a guy like that?
As a defense attorney, there are cases that we call nullification cases. And that is where the law is so clear and your violation is so clear that you have to have another excuse for it. You have to look for a jury to nullify what the actual elements of the law are. Here, what I would do is I would use exactly what Trump has tried to do and say that this is something that was open and notorious, something that was in front of the American public. He was very clear as to what he believed. I'd use the Hannity tape and say that this is what he believed. The problem is that's how you nullify intent, that I didn't intend to do something. Mm-hmm. The problem is that these violations, in large part, are what we call strict liability violations, meaning that the act of the violation is complete when you do it, notwithstanding your mindset. So I could think that I can do this, but you know what? The Records Act says, no, you can't. And it doesn't provide for any type of mindset or culpability. It's what we call strict liability as it relates to these things. So he's got a problem.
Nowhere in your law books, I'm assuming, does it reference a president being able to declassify a document with his mind or just thinking about it, having an ice cream system,
I thought it was found. I thought it was found in the United States Code, page 563 of volume 12, and I looked and couldn't find it. So,
Barrington, what's in your book?
Don't even ask. Don't even ask.
Oh,
see, for all the stuff that I do, I understand very clearly that I'm still a black man in America.
Yeah.
There's certain things. I mean, if I smoke some weed and get caught, I'm probably going to be going to prison or jail for a long time. So I'm not going to put myself in those situations. The arrogance and the hubris of this dude is stunning to me.
Yes.
You know, and I hate when people keep on trying to say, well, he didn't really know because of the way he was raised. Yeah, he knew. And he ain't give a damn because he thought always that he was above the law. And, you know, I'm still kind of, there's a small percentage of my mind that tells me that he still may end up not going to prison because of who he is and because of the real way the system works. But I am praying for the day when they put him away. Because first of all, he shouldn't be running for president. With all of the stuff that he's done, he shouldn't be running. He should have been disqualified a long time ago.
Wow. That was
That tells you about the weaknesses of this country as well.
Well, that is the consensus of a lot of people, that why he hasn't been disqualified. Well, the law states that, and I think Attorney Tarver had talked about this once before, if I'm not mistaken. He can't be disqualified. He hasn't, even if he's convicted, right, Attorney Tarver?
Yeah, he could run the country from a jail cell. He can do that. And I'm sure there's a large group of Americans who would stand behind that. Hey, but you know what? Look, here's the one thing we're not talking about, and I think we should be talking about, and I think Donald Trump is scared to death of. There is a conspiracy count here. All right. Yeah. Which means that he agreed with one or more persons to do a crime. Now, that means that the other persons had a role, probably a knowing role, in helping to obstruct justice. Yeah. So we've got other people here. It's not just him. And so what this means is that you're going to have a broader scope of individuals. And the first one, we've got this thing called queen for a day in the federal system. You get to be queen for a day when you go in with your attorney and you tell your attorney, you tell the U.S. Attorney's Office or the Department of Justice how you can help them, what happened, and your story. And you get a chance to basically negotiate your deal. You call queen for the day. Well, look, those conspirators are going to be the people who get in there first. They're going to be running forward because they got to know that if you tried this case in a courtroom with Donald Trump, you're going down. Yeah. You don't want to go to trial with this guy because this guy, number one, is not going to be able to defend himself because he can't.
Attorney Tarver, he can't be queen for the day, right?
Well, he's not going to be queen for a day because queen for a day means that you're going to have to basically acknowledge that you did something wrong.
Right. And plus, he's the big fish, right?
That's right. But Queen, other people are there.
Yeah, Queen Mark Meadows is my guess.
Hey, they said Mark has been squealing like a little girl.
Yeah, he's been singing like the Temptations, they said. This is what I heard as well.
It's so interesting because these guys come off as being tough guys, and when you put the nutcracker in that particular hot spot, they all be squealing.
Hey, I'd be squealing too.
Yeah. You see, Austin, I'm telling you, I'm not getting myself in that situation, bruh.
Exactly. No way. No way.
Listen, I ain't going down for nobody. I will sing in a heartbeat. They don't have to even dangle the carrot. I'm singing from the start. Austin, and y'all do something wrong, y'all going down.
I told him that I would never do any crime with him because he's a punk. He's gonna snitch.
Y'all better not.
What'd you say, Barrington?
Huh?
What'd you say?
I said that I told Stacy I would never commit a crime with him because he's a punk.
Y'all better not.
Because the minute that they clap them cuffs on him,
listen,
he's gonna be like, "Please, what do you want to know?"
Right. I'm calling Attorney Tarver.
I'd be like,
calling Attorney Tarver.
I would be standing behind Stacy.
Yep. I'm calling him. I'm calling Attorney Tarver and saying, "Listen, this is what I know."
I'm calling the attorney.
I'm
calling Attorney Tarver, right?
we make fun of that, but the fact is that what is it? 99% of all cases in the United States are resolved by some form of plea deal, and a significant number of those pleas involve people who are willing to take some form of deals. And why not? When you're dead to rights, why would you not try to cut down your exposure? And that's the problem that Donald Trump has. Just remember, he just lost an attorney. Okay.
Yeah.
He lost an attorney recently. And the reason he lost an attorney is that a court ruled that there is no privilege where individuals are dealing with the furtherance of a crime. So the question is whether or not you're going to have an attorney witness against him.
It sounds
and
like
I tell you what,
doesn't it?
you want to talk about snitches. Attorneys are the biggest snitches.
So I couldn't run with this crew at all then.
Whatever you want to call them, snitches, Mitches, whatever else. That's what they are. And so,
who's your employer? I'm an intern in attorney Robert Tarver's office.
So we're really looking at a very, very difficult situation for Donald Trump here. He's an individual who, unlike others, cannot take the stand because all of those prior transgressions will be used against him. All of those deposition transcripts where he took the fifth and acknowledged that he could have been in legal jeopardy will be used against him. All of those January 6th statements will be used against him. There is just way too much material. And at some point, the cumulative effect of everything that Donald Trump has gotten away with in his life has now come back to haunt him.
Yeah.
So, stay tuned.
And it couldn't happen to a better person.
But having said all of that, Attorney Tarver, like you said, there's so much out there in the public domain. I mean, television interviews, what he's posted and what he says and what he's done. Wouldn't you almost be tempted to put him on the stand just to try and mitigate that?
Ooh, no.
No. Can't.
No.
Look, here's the problem with Donald Trump. Credibility is always an issue for a witness.
Yes.
And so any information that reflects in any way upon the witness's credibility, truthfulness, veracity, propensity for truthfulness is fair game. So why don't we just put on information about the Charlottesville, all good people? Why don't we, all of the lies that he's told, and we don't have to go through the whole litany, but all of the obvious lies where the facts were true. I had the biggest crowd in history for my inauguration. Look, all of all of those things reflect on credibility. You could literally spend 2 days
millions of
examining him on credibility, and you would be able to show the objective evidence of where he lied. And each one of those would be like a cut.
Yeah.
So finally, he'd lay on the floor a bleeding mess.
Yeah.
And look, and Power 96 brings up, a really great point, one that we all know. It only takes one juror to say not guilty.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so they have to find. Tell me about that too. I know we're spending more time on this than we had planned, but tell me about that too, Attorney Tarver. How do you? I'm sure you've had cases where you feel like, oh my God, we had such a disadvantage. Let me find that one juror and let me play to this juror. How prevalent is that?
Successful trial practice depends in large part on jury selection. And so you have information about who these jurors are and you pick your jury. That is primary. That is probably the largest part of the case, because you know who you're going to be appealing to by who you've selected. And you also know who you're going to have to try to work later on based upon their questions, the answers to their questions in early what we call voir dire, which is the questioning from the court, and documents that they submit. So yeah, that's what you'll do. You will aim your argument toward who you believe to be favorable jurors, and you will also aim your argument in certain ways to the ones you know are unfavorable. And again, only one person, but you want that one person. If you're the defense attorney, you want that to be a strong-willed personality, because a strong-willed personality can move an entire jury. The movie 12 Angry Men is really interesting, not so much for its cinematography, but for the fact that it really reflects what happens in a jury room sometimes, that you can have one person who by sheer will and force can push a number of people in a different direction. So, that can work for you or that can work against you as a defense attorney.
Could he plead some sort of mental incapacity, as David is suggesting?
No, I mean, look, that's a high standard. The high standard for mental incapacity is that you did not appreciate that what you were doing was wrong, or incapable of being able to appreciate the right or wrong of your act, and that's not the case here.
But David, think about Trump and how arrogant he is. You think that he would really say that he was mentally deficient? Why he did what he did? Nah, that wouldn't help his brand. And he's so arrogant that he doesn't want any perceived stain, despite all of the things that he's done to stain himself. If I was Donald Trump's child, I would change my name. I wouldn't want anyone to know. He's a disgusting human being, bruh.
Well, we'll know a whole lot more later today about the specifics of these charges, but we appreciate you breaking them down. In other news this morning, the Supreme Court just yesterday issued a surprising ruling, guys, 5-4 in favor of Black voters in a congressional redistricting case in Alabama, with two conservative justices joining liberals in rejecting a Republican-led effort to weaken a landmark voting rights law. It was Chief Justice John Roberts and Brett Kavanaugh who aligned with the liberals in affirming a lower court's ruling that found a likely violation of the Voting Rights Act in an Alabama congressional map with one majority Black seat out of 7 districts in a state where more than 1 in 4 residents are Black. This was huge, Austin.
I mean, yeah. Can you imagine how bad this plan must have been for the Chief Justice and Kavanaugh to decide to join the liberals in their opinion? I mean, it was just so obviously racist, discriminatory, insulting that they had no choice but to do as they did.
Yeah, and the result of that too, new maps likely that could allow Democrat-leaning Black voters to get to elect their preferred candidates in 2 more congressional districts. But Barrington, I want you. Well, let me go to the attorney first, and then I want you to answer a specific question, Barrington. But Attorney Tarver, these maps, why do you suppose the Supreme Court did this?
Well, look, just a kind of a brief history. In the Shelby case, you had Justice Roberts, who was the leading antagonist, basically saying you didn't need Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act because you have Section 2. So they knocked out Section 5, which was a protective measure, which allowed for those states who had historically been involved with discrimination to have to get permission from the courts before they could redraw these maps. So that was knocked out, and Roberts was the main proponent. And they said you have Section 2. And then you had the assault on Section 2, which basically took almost everything away. This was a case where they could not avoid coming to this particular conclusion because Alabama concentrated Black voters so tightly in one particular district and spread it out all of the others to make it almost impossible to elect candidates for that Black voters wanted. So they almost had to do this at the risk of basically knocking out or basically being hypocrites, which they said about Section 2 being protective in some way.
Barrington, I want you to respond to this. David Youngblood says he believes that this is a setup. He says that they are about to lower the boom on us with the outstanding cases. You know, there's affirmative action. There's, of course, the student loans and several other things that the court is going to be handing down their decisions on this month. Is this a setup, Barrington?
I agree. I agree with David, because if you look, I wrote a story about this yesterday, and in my research, they had the exact same case before them in November or before the midterms, and they voted against it. They said it was okay for Alabama to go forward with this messed up map prior to the elections. So they essentially allowed Republicans to steal seats, and now they're going to come back and act as if, oops, we made a mistake. I believe this is a setup, because anybody who has done any research on John Roberts knows that from the time that he was some lawyer with Ronald Reagan, one of his prime objectives was to destroy voting rights.
Mm-hmm.
That's always been one of his things. So I was mystified when I read the ruling yesterday, because I was like, well, damn, this dude is saying everything that he has opposed for the whole time before he became Chief Justice. So so basically this is just them putting some lipstick on a pig. And when all of these other cases that you talked about come down, they're going to be like, okay, we're going to show you exactly where we stand. And I mean, anybody who has the opportunity, please read Justice Thomas's almost 50-page dissent.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
It's disgusting.
It's disgusting. It almost reads like a parody of a black person. If you were doing the Chappelle show and wanted to show like I don't know if you remember the character Clayton Bigsby, who was the black white supremacist. That's who Clarence Thomas has become. It's almost amazing in his disdain for black people. You know, but hey, let me just say this though. The bright star here, the most amazing thing to come out of this case, Ketanji Jackson. Oh my goodness. You have got to listen to, if you get a chance, listen to her dissect and tear apart the right-wing argument regarding race and give a historical lesson. She, you know, this is her first case really in you know, basically on the court. And she has shown that she is not taking it from anybody.
Nice.
It's amazing.
Yeah, but the thing for me is listening to these Klansmen go before the court and try to justify what they were trying to do. They really were trying to tell the court that it was a race neutral plan. Oh yeah, there we go. Stephen from Django Unchained.
The writings of Uncle Tom. You know, we have
which Tom are we talking about? Tom Scott or Tom Connors?
No, he's talking about Tom.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's several Tims.
I apologize.
Several Tims and Toms. Yeah.
I misspoke. It's Tim Scott.
But he should be tossed off the court as well. So there's so many cases of people that are engaged in egregious behavior, and for norms or for whatever they choose, they're still there. He shouldn't be there. And you notice that they just filed their financial forms. He asked for an extension because he got to make sure that he don't lie his ass off and get himself in more trouble than he's already in.
Exactly.
With all that money that he's taken from Harlan Crow.
Attorney Tarver, I find it very interesting. You as an attorney, you as a member of the bar, have to go by a certain code of ethics. Judges have to go by, except the Supreme Court. Yeah. Why is that?
Oh, well, it's because they get to make the rules. It's, as I say, the golden rules. He who has the gold makes all the rules. They've decided that they don't need this, and they've decided that the only way that they can be free to do what they want to do is not to have these particular. It would be so simple for them to just employ the same rules as every other federal judge. Why wouldn't you do that? Particularly if you know that the institution is under scrutiny and in trouble. Well, the only reason for not doing that is you want to continue to do the same behavior as you've always done. And so you've got Justice Alito running around with members of the Federalist Society saying what he wants to say. You've got Clarence Thomas running around taking gifts from other people. You know, you even got the so-called liberal justices out in areas speaking and doing all the. No, none of you. You know, you took the appointment, sit down, deal with what you have to deal with, stop speaking, stop. It just should not happen overall. And any judges in the United States and almost every other district who did half of the things that Clarence Thomas has done,
they'd be out,
would be
impeached,
removed from the bench.
And let's
not leave out Uncle Thomas's wife Jenny and her criminality.
And that's part of it too. If your family is connected in some way to those causes that come before the court, you are disqualified from the cause. It's a real simple concept. It's something that no one else has to even think about.
But look
at other things, Jenny. I'm sorry, Barrington. Go ahead.
Look at John Roberts' wife.
Yeah.
They said she's like a headhunter for these law firms, and that she's made $10 million, and folks from these law firms have come before the Supreme Court to plead their cases and stuff. So it's just rotten to the core.
It is, and you know, there are other things that these people could do. They could go sell real estate in Kansas, or sell vacuum cleaners in New York. You don't have to, sponsor January 6th insurrections.
Yeah.
Listen, guys, President Biden, just to segue, President Biden has named a government coordinator to handle the thorny issue of book bans in schools. One of a series of initiatives that he announced yesterday is to support the LGBTQ community and, of course, the whole critical race theory thing. Oh, gosh. I hate even bringing that phrase up, but the president said across the country, our nation faces a spike in book bans, efforts that disproportionately strip books about LGBTQ plus or LGBTQI plus communities of color, and other communities off of library and classroom shelves. In fact, 2022 saw the highest number of book bans in 20 years. So the new coordinator under the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights will be tasked with providing new training for schools on how book bans can create a hostile environment for students and possibly violate federal laws. Is this a start? Because I'm sure no one will agree that this is enough.
I mean, look, I think it's a start. It's a shame that any president of the United States has to do this. Who would have thought, 5-10 years ago, that we would be where we are? The president of the United States, any president of the United States, having to name a czar to do what this czar will have responsibility for doing. And again, we have no one to thank but Donald Trump and his racist supporters for us being where we are. It's a start, but I don't think it's going to be enough.
But we do have others to blame, and when you look at blame, here's part of the things that we never look at. The right wing, the Republican Party, has been very steadfast about grassroots efforts and putting people in positions at the lower level, the local level, to be able to influence larger politics.
Yeah.
Whereas the Democratic Party has never spent the type of money on grassroots organizing, the organizing that will be done in large part by Black people and other people of color in these types of districts. So what they've been able to do is place people in all of these districts, these school districts, and while very quietly that's been happening, we've been looking the other way, and now it's chickens coming home to roost. Yeah. Because now these individuals have the power and they have the ability to remove these books, and that's why it's nice to appoint a book czar.
Yeah,
but what can a book czar do? He can't have any control over the local jurisdiction. These school districts can do whatever they decide they want to do. So realistically, it's time for a reset. That's the only way you can deal with this. You've got to get those people out and get other people in who are rational thinkers and who know that book banning is improper.
And the only way to do that is by voting.
Yeah.
But we still have the same conundrum. We say people need to vote, but they're doing everything they can to steal people's vote. Right?
Yeah.
What we're dealing with is organized tyranny against an unorganized opposition. Because the Florida Democratic Party basically gave up Florida to the Republicans. And that's why they got their asses kicked when DeSantis ran this last time.
Right.
It's so interesting because recently I've had this fascination with Hitler, and there, as D-Day and other anniversaries were dropping, there've been all these documentaries about the rise of fascism, the rise of the Nazis, and there is disturbing and very troubling parallels between what Hitler did and what Trump and what used to be the Republican Party is doing. They're on a similar track. The lies they tell, the attempt to control what people think, burning books. Listen, the first thing that any authoritarian government does when they're taken over is do what? Kill the lawyers, kill the teachers, kill people in the arts community. That's where they start, so that they can kill dissent. Then they burn the books. Then they do all of these other things to gain control of people's minds and people's bodies. And that is where we are headed. And it seems it just blows my mind that people are the media doesn't know how to deal with it.
In some ways, some of the media is complicit, though, right?
Most of them are complicit.
Mm-hmm.
Because when Attorney Talbot was talking earlier, he said something that really struck me. He said Trump lied. You can't get most of them idiots in mainstream media to say that Trump lied. Falsehood, fantastical comments. And I mean, it's Black people who were telling folks when Trump came in that he's a liar.
Well, because during the White House Correspondents Association's dinner back in April, President Biden stood up there and said exactly what you just said. It was only the Black press who called Trump out for his lies.
It's true.
He said that right there on the podium in front of all these journalists, right? A few thousand journalists and others in that room. And he said only the Black press. Yeah. It was the Black press who called him out for what he was.
Well, Trump expressed some falsehoods, and it's like, really? So yeah, they're complicit, and he shouldn't have even bothered to waste his time, because as Attorney Talbot said, Democrats have never been hot on grassroots organizing, and I contend that the main reason that they haven't is because they ain't trying to give no Black people no money to do anything.
Well,
here's something I've been
because if you talk to organizers, voting rights organizers, those political folks, their biggest complaint is that the Democrats come into a community the week before the goddamn election.
It seems
they don't pay. They won't give them no money. They won't give them the resources that they need to run a credible campaign. And then they're wringing their hands wondering why they lost. It's some foolishness, man.
Back in 1998, when I first started with MSNBC, there were groups of people, myself, Laura Ingraham, and Coulter, and others. And we were always fascinated with how well the Republican Party and the right wing prepared them, groomed them, and I'm going to use the word grooming, groomed them to become who they became and financed them. Not only that, we were really fascinated about how they recruited Black people and financed them and groomed them to become right-wing ideologues, whether it be Armstrong, Williams, and others. They paid them. They took care of them. They made sure that these people could move forward without having to worry about paying their gas bill or their electric bill. And they were handsomely rewarded, because at the fruits of the labor, right now you have this growing number of Black people who are Black. I don't even want to call them Black conservatives, because I can respect Black conservatives when they deal with conservatism. But you've got a growing Black right-wing ideologue, white supremacist ideologue that has been cultivated from the very beginning, well-financed and taken care of. Democrats refuse to do the same thing. They refuse to pay the money. And I'm not talking about paying for a vote or anything else like that. But if you want to groom people and bring them into the fold, you have to take care of them. You have to do what's necessary to allow them to develop. It's really developing talent. We do it in the NFL. We do it on television. We do it every other place except for politics. And that's the problem.
Well, when you guys were kids, you remember being sent to your room when you got in trouble? As punishment?
I wasn't sent to the room. My ass was beaten. I wasn't sent to no room.
Well,
what stayed in the room?
Huh?
Stayed in the room.
Well, here's the deal. what would be a real severe punishment today, as in today, is send somebody outside. The hazardous air quality levels continue to overwhelm parts of the eastern United States today as a fresh wave of smoke from Canadian wildfires billowed across the border. Major metro areas are seeing unhealthy air quality levels for all age groups, including in New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. According to the National Weather Service, they have warned that residents whose cities were shrouded in haze to stay indoors and wear masks outdoors. Millions, guys, under air quality alerts. Around 123 million people. This is really stunning.
It is stunning, and I'm looking at that little orange dot is right over my house.
It's hovering right over your head.
No, but realistically, Stacey, I there are two municipalities that I am the municipal attorney for, and we had to put out air quality notices telling people that the air quality was bad, that they should stay inside. That's how bad it is. You can see the haze, you can feel the haze, and you can taste that smoke right through your breathing. So it's horrible.
Wow, and you can't even see the Statue of Liberty. It's unreal. And then look at the monument in Washington, in Capitol Hill. That's unreal.
I went outside. I live just outside of DC, and I went outside yesterday, and you can smell the smoke in the air.
Yeah,
and it was hazy. It's not as hazy as New York, but you could still feel the effects of it and see it.
I left out yesterday morning at about 6:30 a.m. to get downtown for a breakfast meeting, and you could see it, you could smell it. And for the first time yesterday, while I was downtown, I was up by DuPont Circle. I wore a mask outside.
Wow.
It's very disconcerting because it really makes you think about a number of other things, particularly how would chemical warfare proceed in something like this? I know that's abstract, but it's just lets you know that there are things that we cannot control as human beings.
I don't. Would you call it abstract though, Mr. Tarver? Would you call it? That's not abstract because
you're right.
We live in Maryland, and every now and then I keep on reading about Aberdeen
proving grounds.
Proving grounds, yeah.
They said that they're making all these chemicals and these toxic chemicals, and all you need is for somebody to mess up. Like if the COVID thing is true, they said it was some in some lab in Wuhan that and they had some accident and COVID spilled out. So it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. So we have, it's like the sword of Damocles over our heads, and we don't know because there's so many secrets that the government's holding from us, and you only know when something happens. Mm-hmm. So it's disturbing.
And it's interesting too. So you're talking about in the DC area, you in Maryland, and of course the DC area. Just last Sunday, right? That's the sonic boom.
Sonic boom.
Yeah. And do we ever? We have not yet found out.
Of course, we don't know. They're not going to tell us.
That plane, though, that left Tennessee. It was Tennessee it left and headed toward New York's MacArthur Airport in Long Island. It decided not to land there and turned around and went toward Washington. That's when the fighter jets, which caused the sonic boom, were deployed, and they, headed out to the plane and followed it all the way into Virginia, where it crashed. And apparently there were 4 people on board, including a small child. But the pilot, according to the U.S. military, the pilot was unconscious, and they could not awaken him. They used red flash signals and other signals to try and awaken the pilot before they crashed. But it's amazing that more information now, it's a week later. Why isn't it available?
Did the people in the plane die?
Yeah, they can't even find the bodies.
I think it might have been an issue of pressurization of the aircraft.
See, I hadn't heard that story.
But you know what? It's interesting because pressurization generally doesn't occur at those lower altitudes. So there's a lot of questions, and that's a Cessna. You know,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's really interesting. I mean, look, we don't know what happened. It just seems that the official version doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. It really. Now I see they have named the deceased in that act in that plane crash, but it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. There was no weather emergency at the time or anything that would force the plane's manifesto had it landing at MacArthur Airport on Long Island, eastern Long Island, right? It reached the airport. It didn't land. It made a U-turn for some reason, for some unknown reason, and headed toward Washington, D.C.
Stacey, were you ever a police reporter?
Yes.
They lie like a rug.
Oh gosh.
Most of the stuff they tell us isn't true.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So
I covered cops and courts in Santa Clarita, California, and Scranton, Pennsylvania, and some other places as well.
I did it for more than 10 years, and most of the stories I wrote, I knew were a lie.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious, because you would, if you cultivate relationships with people in police departments, they'll tell you this is off the record. You go to them and you say this is bullshit, and they say, well, here's what really happened, but we can't tell you. So that happens every day.
Yeah. Well, particularly this is military stuff now too, so you
Yeah,
know.
Yeah, and that makes it worse.
Yeah. Wow.
So you ain't gonna hear nothing.
Well, Austin, you wasn't in town when that happened, right?
Yeah, I was back. You know, I did not.
Did you hear it?
Hear it though. I did not hear it. That was on Sunday.
Yeah, I heard it.
Yeah, I did not hear it, but I was getting all sorts of texts from people saying, "Did you hear that?" I said, "Hear what?"
Yeah, immediately. You know who texted immediately is Anthony Tillman. He's like, and he called it immediately. He said, "A sonic boom in DC." He said, "Did anybody else hear it?"
Yeah.
It was like a minute after it happened. He texted it and asked him, "Where's everybody at?"
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. That is really interesting. So those planes, how do you fly, Tarver? How do you learn to fly that like that?
Well, you know,
I figured Tarver would know. Tarver knows everything.
Well, look, the only thing I know about that is when I went to many years ago, far too many years for me to even remember, when I went to Marine Corps Officer School, OCS, down in Quantico. We had a choice of whether or not to become navigators or pilots in the program. So I did get a chance to spend some time with some of the people who were pilots. And I got to tell you, between themselves and the Navy, they are the most well-trained individuals in our United States military. That's not a slap against the Air Force either, but the training is incredibly rigorous. And it takes a significantly long period of time to learn to fly those particular jets. And they're very meticulous because those jets are extremely expensive, millions and millions of dollars. So, you know, there's no corners cut when it comes to the training for those.
Wow. See, I knew Tarver would know. He you know, they have this thing on Twitter like ask Bob or something like that, or what do you think about this, Bob? And some guy or bot or whatever it is will tell you what it is. So
well, I can't tell you anything about flying them. I can only tell you that they train hard. That's all I can tell you.
Well, it's like a Bob is like a AI version of Austin. Austin can just spit some facts for you too. So
and we know how often AI is wrong, right? So.
On that note, I think we got a civil slander suit going on here. No, but thanks so much. It's always a privilege to have these guys. Attorney Tarver drops in. I mean, he's extremely busy. We know, like you said, 2 municipalities. And then you got to defend all those criminals or alleged criminals. Who knows? He might be getting that call. Trump is losing attorneys left and right. He might be getting that call from Mar-a-Lago.
So if you decide to work for Trump, please come back on and talk to us.
Please. It's highly unlikely that he would want me to be involved, particularly with our experience in Atlantic City. So
yeah, does he have any black lawyers though?
I haven't seen any, but
I
I'm
ain't,
sure
I ain't seen none.
I'm sure he may get some depending on the situation.
He
Look,
probably should have gotten them from the beginning.
lawyers are afraid of him too because they may be all going to jail too.
Exactly.
No,
Lawyers-
but even outside of that, they said a lot of lawyers ain't messing with him because he won't pay them.
Yeah.
Right.
Such a disgusting creature.
And Attorney Tarver, in all of your years of practice, sir, have you ever had to get a lawyer
No,
to defend you?
no. Fortunately, I have, well, look, I had some house problems and closing, things like that, but certainly not for a criminal offense. I'll tell you that.
In other words, Austin is saying, "Are you a criminal?"
Oh, no.
Not just a criminal
I
defense
got to
attorney.
push back on that one.
Danger.
No, not for a criminal offense.
Turning on Mr. Trump, whether I will get paid and whether I will need a lawyer myself because of the nonsense that he's gotten me caught up in.
On that note, folks, have a great weekend. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Attorney Tarver, Barrington, Austin. Have a safe weekend as well. We'll see you next week.
All right, everyone.